How's it going, everybody? My name's Dave Whipple and you're watching Bushradical. Well, like the title says, my car's finished. I did the best I could with it, and it took me about 5 days and it's done. Yeah, I know that was kind of clickbait. It was kind of a setup. I even in the thumbnail, I made sure that the donor car was in it. So like the title says, my car's finished. It took me somewhere along the lines of about 35 hours. About 4 hours to pull the first engine, probably 5 hours to do the second, maybe 6. Bring the other car in, drop the other engine in, and there was a lot of little things that kind of needed to be tended to before I could move on. Everything auto mechanic is a sequence. So it took me, if you put it all together, it was probably about 30 hours, 35 hours, and it's running like a watch. Want to hear it? Well, I gotta say, it really is great to have the car back on the road. This car's got quite a story. Not only have we owned it for 10 years, but it kind of goes farther than that even. Let me tell you a story. So you guys probably know that I had a lot of problems with my intestines years ago. A lot of the doctors thought I had Crohn's, but I couldn't keep weight on. I was always in pain. I ended up having 2 surgeries. The first one I had in Fairbanks, and 2 years later I had one in the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. The first surgery, I got out of the first surgery and I got a terrible infection. I had a kidney infection, and I became a mess. After surgery complications, Brooke and I and the kids, we flew down to Michigan and we stayed with Brooke's brother. And I was basically in bed for about 2.5 months. And in and out of the hospital. When I finally was turning the corner and I was starting to feel decent, my family got together and they put together a benefit for me. And what a blessing. You never expect to be the person that's on the receiving end of a benefit. But a lot of the guys I used to play music with came, and there was a few bands, and I didn't go. I was just getting to the point where I could spend a few hours a day not in bed. But what a blessing. Lots and lots of folks I knew showed up, and my family raised $8,000 for Brooke and I. And we really needed it too. Right before we left Alaska to fly down to Michigan, we had a Dodge Grand Caravan. And that Grand Caravan, it had a viscous clutch go bad in it. So it was really shaking bad. And we knew that as soon as we went back to Alaska and hit the ground, we would need a new vehicle. So we took a bit of that money that had been raised in the benefit, and we bought this car. This car originally had 53,000 miles. It was already a reconstructed title. It had been in a wreck before. So we took, I believe it was $2,700 out of that $8,000, and we bought this car. And, that's been 10 years ago. This car has taken both of our kids to the school bus for the first day of school. This car's been all over Canada, all over the United States. I've crossed Canada 12 times with this car. So when it died the other day, the practical side of me said, I know this car. I put a lot of parts into it. It doesn't have any rust. If something breaks, I know how to fix it. But the sentimental side of me said, this car's a big part of my story at this point. There's so much history in this car. It's got a lot of sentimental value. This is basically, if you want to look at it in a roundabout way, this basically is a car that my family and friends bought. So other than just the fact that I like it, I like the fact that it's a stick. So if the starter goes out, I can pop start it. I like the fact that everything in it is, I understand it. I've been working on this thing for a decade, but it also, it's got a lot of sentimental value. And where I was kind of on my way out, and I got a second chance, I see it's only fitting that this car gets a second chance too. So for all you gearheads, let me show you how the swap went. So there she is. There's this car's Heart transplant. It's second lease on life. It was actually fairly easy to change everything. A couple things were different with the intake manifold. Right there you can see the fuel rail. Now the fuel rail for this engine I had to swap with my other engine because they were completely different. This wiring harness that runs along the top of the engine and hooks into all the injectors, that was different between the two engines. Not so much the harness, but the plug. The end of the plug was different, so I had to change that wiring harness. This was pretty much the only thing that was really different about the two engines. If you look right down here, there's this milled boss. And all it is a raised spot on the engine block that's drilled and tapped for a bolt. Now that particular spot on the block is for what's called a knock sensor. A knock sensor is like a microphone, and it hears the detonation in each cylinder, and it helps to adjust the timing to the detonation. So the original engine is a 98 and it had a knock sensor. The engine I put in the car is a 97 and it did not have a knock sensor. So I actually had to find another place to mount it. I took this iron motor mount on the other engine. I milled off this little triangle support and I drilled a hole through it, and I put a steel disc that I had milled flat right over top of that and bolted it all together with the knock sensor right there. Basically with a knock sensor, you want it, attached to something that's attached to the block, or, best case scenario, attached right to the block like the factory had it. But this is where I located the new knock sensor, and it seems to be quite happy there. The car's running just fine, no abnormalities. The only other real issue I had was right here. This is the, well, I guess this is called a speed sensor, but it's basically, there's a gear that goes down into the transmission. So when I finished the engine swap, my speedometer did not work. I had to switch these sensors. Took the one out of this transmission, put it in my car, took that one from my car, put it back in this transmission just to plug the hole. Now the speedometer works fine. Also, the check engine light had come on because the speedometer wasn't functioning. Once I swapped out that sensor, the check engine light went off. I also took the new transmission that went into my car and I pulled off the pressure plate and the clutch plate because at 116,000, this clutch plate has quite a bit of wear to it, and this pressure plate has some odd wear across the face. And the one that was in my original transmission, I had replaced it last year, so it had about 25,000 miles on it or so, and it still looked brand new. So I took these parts out of the donor transmission and I put my clutch and pressure plate in the donor transmission. So that's basically everything in a nutshell. I've got my car back on the road. It shifts smooth. The motor and transmission that's in my car now has about 116,000. I've put about 225 miles on it since the swap. Everything's good. No check engine lights on anymore after that speedometer swap. I want to thank my wife, Brooke, for having the patience and the faith to see me through this swap. It took a while to get it done, and then there were some spaces where I was waiting for things, so it was kind of a, you're putting a lot of work into it, and you never know how it's going to turn out. Also, I want to say thanks to my dad. My dad came up on the last day of the swap. I had the engine in, and I was hooking stuff up, and Dad helped me wrestle out a couple CV axles that needed to be swapped out that I couldn't get them by myself. So with the two of us, one person prying and one person tapping, we got them to pop out. So thanks, Dad. I appreciate that. Also, I want to say thanks to my dad because he loaned me the two chain falls. I was going to grab a come-along and do it all with a come-along, but the two chain falls are so much slicker. So thanks, Dad. I appreciate that. So for everybody that was interested in why I've been off YouTube for so long, and everybody that commented about the car and stuff, now you know how it turned out. The engine swapped over easy. Everything's in there, running nice and smooth. I got a whole car worth of donor parts, and I'm ready to move on with life. So thank you guys so much for watching Bushradical. My name's Dave Whipple. And be radical, eh? See you soon.